In these times of challenge and controversy, we stand for the remedy that can make the difference and maintain the democracy, and that remedy is impeachment. So he must be indicted. Impeachment. But then there's a Senate, and the Senate has the opportunity to try the case. It is in the Senate that you get what? Conviction. Conviction. And when the Senate convicts, then the Senate has the opportunity to do what? Remove. Impeach, convict, and remove. That's why we're here today. And remember that there will be articles of impeachment filed before the Christmas break. This I pledge, this I will do. God bless you. I'm here today.
Okay, so we're looking at a fresh impeachment effort against Donald Trump in his second term. But this situation is way more complicated than just Democrats trying to hold Trump accountable. There's actually a serious split within the Democratic Party about whether pursuing impeachment right now is the right move or a political disaster waiting to happen. Let me break down what's actually happening here, because the dynamics matter as much as the allegations themselves. Representative Sri Thinder from Michigan introduced 7 articles of impeachment against Trump in April 2025. These aren't rehashed versions of the previous impeachments from Trump's first term. These are new allegations based on Trump's conduct during his second presidency. Thinder is accusing Trump of flagrant constitutional violations and abuse of power that he argues demonstrate Trump is unfit to continue serving as president. The word flagrant is important. It suggests these aren't technical violations or debatable interpretations of presidential authority. Thinder is alleging open, obvious violations that any reasonable person can see. The 7 articles that Thinder introduced cover a wide range of alleged misconduct. This isn't a narrow impeachment focused on one incident like the Ukraine call that led to Trump's first impeachment. This is a comprehensive indictment of Trump's entire approach to wielding presidential power in ways that Thinder argues violate the Constitution and exceed any legitimate exercise of executive authority. Let's go through what each article alleges, because the specifics matter for understanding the legal and constitutional arguments. The first article covers obstruction of justice and abuse of executive power, specifically focused on unlawful deportations, denying due process, and defying federal court orders. This relates to Trump's immigration enforcement policies, where Thinder alleges Trump has ordered deportations without proper legal proceedings, denied people their constitutional right to due process before deporting them, and continued policies even after federal courts ordered him to stop. Defying court orders is particularly serious because it represents the president refusing to comply with the judicial branch's constitutional authority. The second article accuses Trump of usurping Congress's appropriations power by impounding funds and dismantling agencies created by statute. The Constitution gives Congress the power of the purse. Only Congress can appropriate money and decide how it's spent. If Trump is refusing to spend money that Congress appropriated, or if he's shutting down agencies that Congress created through legislation, he's violating the separation of powers by taking congressional authority for himself. This has been a recurring issue with Trump. He thinks he can simply refuse to spend money on programs he doesn't like even when Congress has appropriated that funding. The third article focuses on abuse of trade and war powers, alleging Trump is using tariffs and threatening military action against sovereign nations in ways that violate separation of powers. The Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and the power to declare war. If Trump is using tariffs as weapons without proper congressional authorization, or if he's threatening military action without constitutional authority, he's exceeding his powers as president. The Mexico military intervention threats we discussed earlier would be an example of the kind of conduct this article addresses. The fourth article alleges violation of First Amendment rights through retaliation against media outlets, critics, and attorneys who oppose or criticize Trump. This includes using government power to punish dissent, things like threatening to revoke broadcast licenses of news networks that criticize him, using regulatory agencies to harass critics, or targeting attorneys who represent his opponents. The First Amendment protects free speech and free press, and presidents can't use government power to retaliate against people for exercising those rights. Trump's threats against ABC News over the Epstein Files questions would be an example of the conduct this article covers. The fifth article accuses Trump of creating an unlawful office by setting up a Department of Government Efficiency that House lawyers say has no constitutional or statutory basis. The Constitution says Congress creates executive departments through legislation. If Trump just created a new department without congressional authorization, that's unconstitutional. Even if he calls it something other than a department, if it functions like an executive department with authority and funding, it needs congressional approval to exist. This relates to the broader pattern of Trump trying to govern through executive action without congressional involvement. The sixth article alleges bribery and corruption through intervening in prosecutions or dropping cases to reward allies and punish enemies. This is about Trump using the Justice Department as his personal legal team rather than as an independent agency that enforces laws fairly. If Trump is telling DOJ to drop cases against people who support him or to pursue cases against people who oppose him, that's corruption, using government power for personal political benefit rather than for legitimate law enforcement purposes. This goes directly to rule of law and equal justice principles. The seventh article is characterized as tyrannical overreach, a catch-all claiming a pattern of conduct fundamentally incompatible with constitutional limits on the presidency. This article probably ties together all the specific allegations in the other articles to paint a picture of systematic abuse of power and disregard for constitutional constraints. The word tyrannical is strong. It's saying Trump is governing like a tyrant rather than like a president bound by law. That's about as serious an allegation as you can make in our constitutional system, separately from Thainder's effort. Representative Al Green from Texas has vowed yet another impeachment push. Green has been calling for Trump's impeachment repeatedly since Trump's first term. His latest effort characterizes impeachment as a litmus test for Democrats who claim Trump is a threat to democracy. Green is essentially saying if you really believe Trump threatens democracy, you have to support impeachment. Otherwise, your claims about Trump being dangerous are just rhetoric. That puts pressure on Democrats to either support impeachment or explain why they won't. The controversy within the Democratic Party over this impeachment push reveals deep divisions about strategy, priorities, and how to most effectively oppose Trump's presidency. Democratic leadership resistance to these impeachment efforts has been significant and public. Top Democrats and House leaders have largely tried to shut down or discourage these impeachment pushes. They're not saying Trump hasn't done anything wrong. They're arguing that rogue impeachment efforts risk backfiring politically and distracting from other ways of holding Trump accountable, like investigations, oversight hearings, and focusing on winning elections. Leadership wants to control the timing and strategy rather than having individual members force their hand. The argument that impeachment pushes could backfire politically is based on lessons from Trump's previous impeachments. Trump was impeached twice during his first term, and both times he was acquitted by the Senate. Many Democrats believe those impeachments, while justified on the merits, actually helped Trump politically by allowing him to claim he was being persecuted and by rallying his base around him as a victim of partisan attacks. Leadership worries a third impeachment could have the same effect, energizing Trump's supporters without accomplishing removal. The concern about distraction is also legitimate. Impeachment proceedings consume enormous time, attention, and political capital. If Democrats are focused on impeachment, they're not focused on legislative priorities, oversight of other Trump administration actions, or building a political case for the 2026 midterms and 2028 presidential election. Leadership may calculate that their limited political resources are better spent on things other than an impeachment that's unlikely to result in removal. The question is whether holding Trump accountable requires impeachment regardless of political calculation. The symbolic versus practical dimension of this impeachment push is crucial for understanding what Thander and Green are trying to accomplish. With Republicans controlling the House and loyalists controlling the Senate, there's virtually no chance these impeachment articles lead to Trump's removal from office. Everyone involved knows that. So why pursue impeachment if it can't succeed in removing Trump? The answer is that impeachment serves purposes beyond removal. Keeping a legal record of alleged constitutional violations is one important function of impeachment articles, even if they don't lead to removal. When members of Congress introduce articles of impeachment, those articles become part of the official congressional record. They document for history what allegations were made, what evidence supported them, and how members voted. Future historians and legal scholars will look at impeachment articles as evidence of what constitutional violations were alleged and how seriously they were taken. That creates an official record even without conviction. Forcing colleagues to go on record is another strategic purpose of introducing impeachment articles. If articles are introduced and brought to a vote, every member of Congress has to vote yes or no. That creates political accountability. Members can't avoid taking a position. They either support impeachment based on the allegations, or they vote against it and have to explain to constituents why they didn't think Trump's conduct warranted impeachment. That political pressure can be valuable even if impeachment doesn't succeed. The litmus test framing that Al Green uses is particularly provocative. He's saying to fellow Democrats, you claim Trump is an existential threat to democracy. You say he's violating the Constitution. You argue he's dangerous and unfit. Well, if you really believe all that, you should support impeachment. If you oppose impeachment despite believing Trump is a threat, you're being politically calculating rather than principled. That's a direct challenge to Democratic leadership and members who want to avoid impeachment. The fear that a new impeachment fight could fracture the Democratic Party is real. Democrats are already dealing with internal divisions between progressive and moderate wings on policy issues, between those who want confrontational opposition to Trump and those who want to focus on kitchen table issues, between members from safe blue districts who can take strong anti-Trump positions and members from competitive districts who worry about alienating swing voters. An impeachment fight could deepen those divisions and create public infighting that damages the party. The concern that impeachment could actually strengthen Trump politically is based on his proven ability to use attacks against him as fuel for his political movement. Trump thrives on conflict and portraying himself as a victim of elite persecution. Impeachment plays into that narrative perfectly. He can tell supporters that Democrats are so desperate to stop him that they're abusing constitutional processes through baseless impeachment rather than accepting that voters chose him. Whether that narrative is fair doesn't matter. What matters is whether it's politically effective. The underlying tension in this impeachment debate is between constitutional duty and political strategy. Democrats are wrestling with whether they have a constitutional obligation to impeach a president they believe is violating his oath of office, or whether prudent political strategy requires them to hold off on impeachment and pursue other avenues of accountability. The constitutional argument for impeachment is straightforward. The Constitution provides impeachment as the remedy when presidents commit high crimes and misdemeanors. If Trump is systematically violating the Constitution through the conduct alleged in these impeachment articles, then Democrats have a constitutional duty to impeach regardless of political consequences. The founders gave Congress impeachment power precisely for situations where presidents abuse their authority and threaten constitutional government. Failing to use that power when it's warranted would be a dereliction of constitutional duty. But the political reality is that impeachment only works if it can succeed in removing a president or at least imposing serious political costs that constrain presidential misconduct. If impeachment is guaranteed to fail in the Senate and actually helps the president politically, is it still a wise use of congressional authority? Or does failed impeachment undermine the institution by making it look like a partisan tool rather than a legitimate constitutional mechanism? That's the dilemma Democratic leadership faces. The pattern of conduct that Thainder's articles allege, systematic constitutional violations across multiple areas of presidential authority, would seem to make a strong case for impeachment on the merits. These aren't allegations of one improper phone call or one abuse of power. These are allegations that Trump is governing in ways fundamentally incompatible with constitutional limits on the presidency, that he's usurping congressional authority, defying court orders, retaliating against critics, and using government power corruptly. If those allegations are true, impeachment would seem constitutionally required. The question is whether the allegations can be proven sufficiently to convince not just Democrats, but also some Republicans and persuadable members of the public. Previous Trump impeachments failed partly because they couldn't break through partisan divisions. Republicans dismissed them as partisan witch hunts, and most Republican voters agreed. If a third impeachment would face the same partisan dynamics, what's accomplished beyond creating an official record? That's where Democrats disagree about whether impeachment is worth pursuing. The alternative approaches that Democratic leadership prefers include aggressive oversight hearings that expose Trump administration misconduct, lawsuits challenging illegal executive actions, using appropriations power to constrain Trump's ability to pursue harmful policies, and building a political case against Trump and Republicans for the next election. These approaches might be more effective at actually constraining Trump and building public opposition than impeachment that's guaranteed to fail in the Senate. But they don't provide the formal constitutional accountability that impeachment represents. The precedent being set by how Congress responds to Trump's alleged constitutional violations will matter for future presidents. If Trump can defy court orders, usurp congressional authority, retaliate against critics, and abuse executive power without facing impeachment, what message does that send to future presidents? That impeachment is only for the most extreme cases? That presidents can violate the Constitution as long as their party controls Congress? That political considerations trump constitutional obligations? Those precedents could weaken constitutional constraints on presidential power for generations. So where does this leave us? Democrats have introduced new impeachment articles against Trump alleging serious constitutional violations across multiple areas. Democratic leadership is resistant to pursuing impeachment because they fear it will backfire politically and distract from other priorities. Individual members like Fader and Green are pushing forward anyway because they believe constitutional duty requires impeachment regardless of political calculation. The split within the party reflects genuine disagreement about whether impeachment is the right tool for this moment or whether other approaches would be more effective at holding Trump accountable and protecting constitutional government. For those watching this debate, the question is what you believe impeachment is for. Is it a constitutional mechanism that should be used whenever presidents commit high crimes and misdemeanors, regardless of whether removal is politically achievable? Or is it a tool that should only be deployed when there's realistic chance of success and when the political benefits outweigh the costs? Your answer to that question probably determines whether you think Democrats should pursue this impeachment or whether leadership is right to resist it. There are legitimate arguments on both sides rooted in different understandings of constitutional duty, political strategy, and the purpose of impeachment as a tool for holding presidents accountable. What's clear is that Trump's conduct during his second term is generating serious allegations of constitutional violations from Democrats who believe he's abusing presidential power in systematic ways. Whether those allegations lead to impeachment depends on internal Democratic politics as much as on the strength of the allegations themselves. And whether impeachment would actually accomplish anything beyond creating an official record depends on political dynamics that make removal essentially impossible given Republican control of Congress. This is messy, complicated, and controversial within the Democratic Party. But it's also an important debate about how to defend constitutional government when one party believes the president is violating constitutional limits, but lacks the political power to remove him from office through impeachment. The choices Democrats make will set precedents and send messages about whether constitutional violations by presidents will be formally challenged even when removal isn't achievable, or whether political calculation will override constitutional duty when the politics don't favor impeachment. Those are the stakes of this internal Democratic debate over pursuing new impeachment articles against Trump. And how it resolves will tell us something important about whether constitutional accountability for presidential misconduct is still taken seriously when it's politically difficult, or whether impeachment has become a tool that's only used when political circumstances favor it regardless of whether constitutional violations warrant it. Retry.